Hey everyone, Pugs here with one new review for y'all. As you can see by my godly presence today, I'm here covering the very last episode of Season 6, The Clash of Triton. You know, it's funny how back in the day I used to be annoyed reviewing specials because it took too long. Now though, when an episode is a special, it's great because I have to do less. Hold on, that makes me sound like I don't like or don't care about doing these. Not true, but I'm not gonna pretend like it isn't nice when I don't have to write a script for 2 episodes. Anyway, let me just move on to the part where I, as always, say thank you to everyone watching today. I'm always appreciative of your support for this channel, and that always becomes a little more poignant at the ends of seasons like this. And with that, let me now just get right into it. And here we reach the final episode of Season 6, The Clash of Triton. Alright everyone, raise your hands if you actually remember this episode. Yeah, I know I don't have anyone in front of me right now, but that works because I'm willing to bet I'm seeing the same amount of hands that I would if I actually did have a crowd of my viewers here with me. I might be speaking hyperbolically now, but it's true that this is an episode that no one ever talks about, and I believe it's easily one of the most forgotten specials of this show. I know that for me personally, my memory of this episode tends to be hazy, unless I'm, of course, revisiting it like I am now. And it's funny because I'm pretty sure that I actually remember the premiere of this episode. Maybe this is the part where we should all start getting concerned about the quality of the episode. Obviously, being forgettable doesn't automatically mean an episode is going to be bad, but a special episode being forgettable is a bit of a concern. And let me tell you that that concern is most definitely founded in this episode, because if there is one word I'd use to describe the Clash of Triton, it would be boring. Good God, is this episode boring? How can you even make an episode featuring the return of a character that we haven't seen in literally 10 years, outside of a single gag, boring? Oh, I know, by not focusing on that character at all. This decision boggles the mind. Neptune is a perfectly fine and interesting character, and once again, one we haven't seen in a literal decade, so why does this episode choose to focus on his son? The plot itself doesn't interest me because I do not care for the drama of a character we barely see. The Clash of Triton just misses so many opportunities to do something legitimately interesting, which is kind of something I'll be touching on throughout this review. For example, the first bit taking place at the Krusty Krab when Mr. Krabs assumes he's being pranked when Queen Amphitrite calls the Krusty Krab to have King Neptune's birthday party there. This part of the episode is alright, but it could have been funnier to hear Queen Amphitrite's side of the conversation here, or for things to be a lot more dramatic and expressive and maybe even plot influential. But what we get instead is just kinda meh. When I did my original written review of this episode on the SpongeBuddy Mania forum, I jumped from this setup portion at the Krusty Krab to when SpongeBob finds Triton without writing anything about the events that occurred between these two parts of the episode. That is because there is basically nothing to fucking talk about. I cannot stress enough how goddamn boring this episode is. Mr. Krabs turns the royal family coming down to the Krusty Krab into a money-making spectacle, as is his way. And it's boring. When Neptune and Amphitrite arrive, SpongeBob proceeds to fail to read the room by repeatedly searching for Triton, who Neptune is trying not to think about, and this is boring. It's also not funny either, although I can see the attempt for gags. Neptune tells his tale of woe about Triton, which is done through flashback, and you can guess at this point, it's fucking boring. Like, it is utterly ridiculous how completely not interested I am. When Neptune finishes telling his tale, which at least was boring in universe as well, he's too upset to eat at the Krusty Krab, which threatens to ruin Mr. Krabs' money-making scheme as well. So SpongeBob decides to do the only thing he can think of, find Triton so that Neptune will be happy. Do you guys see the problem here? Because now that I'm revisiting this episode again and being aided slightly by the SpongeBob wiki, I do. The problem is that the entire first act of this episode is setup. Now listen, I don't mind an episode that takes its time to set up the plot, but given that first off, the second half of the episode is not a good payoff, and secondly, the setup is fucking boring, this is most definitely an issue. We just keep sitting here waiting for something to happen, and nothing does. It's not funny, and it's not interesting. This is not good at all. When SpongeBob finds Triton, we are subjected to a very uncomfortable and unfunny scene. It's also during this scene that I realize that Triton quite literally has no interesting character whatsoever, and this just adds to the plethora of boring vibes this episode has going on. Then Patrick enters the episode as SpongeBob needs his lockpicking expertise. Even the typical joke we have of hearing only half of the conversation here feels trite and uninspired. Patrick's entrance both excites me and fills me with concern. I'm excited because yay, something new to hopefully shake things up, but I'm also concerned because this season has not had a good track record at making SpongeBob and Patrick work well together. It does actually turn out fine, to this episode's credit, but again, nothing much happens. They free Triton, go on a joyride, and then Triton turns out to be just as bad as his father when it comes to treating people like shit. Who could have foreseen this? I guess this means that the cage punishment actually worked. Unfortunately, this means that I really and truly do not care about Neptune or Triton, so yeah. The Clash of Triton proceeds to completely switch gears because it wants to flex that it is, in fact, a special. And see, I wouldn't even mind this conflict if I was actually interested in what was going on, but as I've been saying this whole time, I truly do not care. None of these guest characters are pleasant. I also just think that the pacing of this episode is kind of really bad for the reasons I outlined earlier. Triton only gets freed like 15 minutes into this 22-minute episode, and he only starts destroying stuff like 17 minutes in or so. So not that great for an episode called The Clash of Triton. It's almost like if they put more focus on Neptune, this problem could have resolved itself. Should have just eliminated the whole Krusty Krab aspect and have Neptune go and ask, I don't know, SpongeBob for his help with his son or something like that. I'm not here to write a story. I'm just here to talk about where this story fails. I suppose this is the part where I let up on the episode a little bit. The Clash of Triton might be boring as shit, but it's not a complete failure at everything, not even close. For as much as I've been saying this episode isn't funny, it does have its moments. I liked that gag with Patrick at the beginning when SpongeBob's being all dramatic with the spatula, which I'm choosing to see as a reference to Neptune's spatula, because if this episode really went for its entire runtime without a reference to that, I don't know what I'll do. Or Mr. Krabs' quip about paying SpongeBob and Squidward. I also liked the way that this episode parodied people obsessed with a certain royal family. SpongeBob's complete obliviousness to the problem of mentioning Triton ended up being more amusing than I expected. Not funny, mind you, and it still was a little boring, but it was, somewhat amusing too. The secret entrance bit was nice too. I also liked the reference to the first movie with the triple gooberberry sunrise part, so at least we got one much needed reference here. And then the ending of this episode was great too, so that helps to not end things on a sour note. I suppose another quote-unquote problem with this episode is that it uses the exact opposite arc as the one that we saw in the first movie between King Neptune and Mindy. Now, y'all know that I know that this show doesn't give a shit about consistency, which is why I don't truly regard this as a problem, but it does feel a little weird for this episode to be borrowing from the movie in such an important way, but then switching it up. In the movie, Mindy, of course, taught Neptune how to care for the people he rules over. In this episode, Neptune is teaching Triton not to care. It's weird. And again, this episode makes both of these characters incredible assholes, and not in an entertaining way, so it's not like I care about what happens to them at all. Alright, let's sum it all up. Well, boring, and a little more boring. That's what the Clash of Triton was to me. There was so much missed potential here to do anything even remotely interesting, and what we got truly was not it. And there was at least an attempt here to make the boring entertaining, but it most certainly wasn't enough. To perhaps the surprise of some, I'm not gonna say that this is a mediocre tier episode, just because, believe it or not, I'm not irritated watching this one, but it is so very dull. That is why this episode works best in the lower end of my okay tier, where it comes in with a score of 6.3 out of 10. For as much as this show usually has good endings within episodes, it seems to stick the landing when it comes to seasons with far less frequency. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. So I considered discussing this during the review, but I decided to put it here. But there used to be a game on Nick.com based on this episode, and while I was looking that game up so that I could link it here, I learned that there was a PC game based on this episode as well that I'd never heard of in my life. Very, very interesting. Also, when I said that I remember this episode premiering, part of me wonders if that's a false memory since I don't remember anything other than the advertisements. I guess I can never be sure. It's interesting how as I go through this show, I should have even more memories of the premieres of these episodes. Kind of makes me feel weird. Not old, because I'm not old objectively, but nostalgic, I guess, since I'm remembering childhood. It's really funny that this episode is about, even if in name only, Triton, because lately I've been watching a lot of poker, right? And the channel that I've been watching is Triton Poker. Just a funny coincidence. And yes, I do legitimately enjoy watching poker. I know that comes out of left field for a lot of people. My last thought, of course, is that we made it to the end of season 6. It's been a ride, and we're not quite done yet, since I've got to put out my season 6 overview, which I'm working on as we speak. Please, I don't want to have to delay a video yet again. I've had to do that so much while reviewing this season, it's driving me up a wall. Can't say that that'll change anytime soon. Grad school is just kinda really unpredictable when it comes to knowing how busy I'll be one week versus the next. Makes me miss undergrad in a way. Alright, well, before I start reminiscing, let me just end the video now so I can work on that big overview for season 6, where we'll close this season out properly. I'll see y'all then.